Ladies and gentlemen, I have been asked to say that we will be beginning in 2 minutes from now. Good evening. Your Highness, Excellencies, distinguished guests. My name is David Foster. I work as a presenter for Al Jazeera English, and in a lifetime spent as a journalist, I have discovered that the causes and the inabilities to solve countless conflicts come mainly through a lack of communication. Here at the 14th Doha Forum and the 9th Enriching the Middle East Economic Future conference, there is every chance for a multitude, just look around the room, a multitude of cultures to communicate from. And these are some of our sessions: democracy, building after the change, to human security in light of conflicts and crises, to the cost of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Let us talk, ladies and gentlemen. Let us enjoy the conversation. But perhaps, in my opinion, more importantly, let's allow ourselves to listen. And now it is my pleasure, as we begin the official proceedings here ahead of tonight's opening dinner, to invite up onto the stage His Excellency Dr. Khalid bin Mohammed Al Attiyah, Qatar's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to put your headsets on, I'll be doing my speech in Arabic. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حضرة صاحب السمو الشيخ تميم بن حمد آل ثاني أمير دولة قطر، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة الحضور الكرام، يسعدني أن أحييكم وأرحب بكم في الدوحة للمشاركة في منتدى الدوحة الرابع عشر الذي يعقد هذا العام تحت شعار رؤى حول الاستقرار العالمي الاستراتيجي الاقتصادي والتنموي. لا شك أن اختيار هذا الشعار له العديد من الدلالات الهامة في ظل التحولات والتغيرات التي شهدتها منطقة الشرق الأوسط، وبخاصة المنطقة العربية خلال السنوات الثلاث الماضية، وما تزال وقد صاحبت هذه التحولات تحديات وتداعيات أضحت تشكل تهديداً على الاستقرار في منطقة الشرق الأوسط والاستقرار العالمي في شتى المجالات الاقتصادية والسياسية والاجتماعية والأمنية والتنموية. ويظل التحدي الأكبر في منطقة الشرق الأوسط ما تواجهه عملية السلام بين الفلسطينيين وإسرائيل من صعوبات وعقبات يصعب بل يستحيل معها تحقيق السلام العادل والاستقرار المنشود في المنطقة إلا عبر التزام إسرائيل بأساس ومبادئ عملية السلام وفقاً لقرارات الشرعية الدولية من خلال حل الدولتين الذي توافق عليه المجتمع الدولي. إن غياب الحل العادل والشامل للقضية الفلسطينية يهدد بما لا يدع مجالاً للشك كافة محاولات السعي نحو تحقيق وترسيخ الاستقرار والأمن في المنطقة، وعلى إسرائيل مراجعة قرارها بوقف المفاوضات وفرض عقوبات إضافية على الفلسطينيين، وأن تدرك مخاطر ضياع فرصة تحقيق السلام. وندعو المجتمع الدولي والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بشكل خاص إلى مواصلة جهودهم لتحقيق عملية السلام حتى لا يتفاقم العنف والصراع في المنطقة وتنعكس تداعياته الخطيرة على السلم والاستقرار العالمي. السيدات والسادة الضيوف الكرام، في ظل غياب السلطة العالمية الفعالة التي تحقق الشرعية الدولية بمفهومها الصحيح ووفق منهج ديمقراطي سليم، لا يزال النظام الدولي يعاني من ازدواجية المعايير. وعلى الرغم من ذلك فلا يجب التخلي عن الشرعية الدولية بمفهومها الصحيح، ويتعين على المجتمع الدولي العمل الجاد على إصلاح النظام العالمي وتجنيب الانتقائية والازدواجية في المعايير، وذلك في تنفيذ القانون الدولي وقرارات الشرعية حتى يسود العالم الاستقرار والأمن والسلام. إن تحقيق الاستقرار والأمن الجماعي يتطلبان التزام القوى الفاعلة في المجتمع الدولي بالشرعية الدولية وتحمل المسؤولية الأخلاقية والقانونية لتحقيق إرادة الشعوب وتطلعاتها المشروعة في الاستقرار والأمن والحرية والتغيير. وفي هذا الإطار فإن الكارثة الإنسانية التي يعاني منها الشعب السوري الشقيق من جرائم الإبادة والقتل والتشريد وتدمير المدن والقرى على يد النظام السوري الحالي تلقي بتأثيرات سلبية بل كارثية على مجمل الأوضاع في المنطقة. ولا شك أن استمرار هذه الأزمة حتى الآن يرجع إلى تقاعس المجتمع الدولي في التعامل الحازم والجاد مع هذه الأزمة من خلال التطبيق غير الصحيح والسليم للقانون الدولي وقواعد الشرعية الدولية. ومن هذا المنطلق على المجتمع الدولي أن يدرك الآن وأكثر من أي وقت مضى ضرورة إنهاء هذه الأزمة بوقف نزيف الدماء والدمار والمعاناة الإنسانية للشعب السوري وتحقيق تطلعاته المشروعة في التغيير والحفاظ على وحدة سوريا. وقد بات لزاما على مجلس الأمن الآن يباشر مسؤولياته ويفرض تنفيذ قراراته بوقف إطلاق النار لحماية الشعب السوري من القتل والتشريد في ظل استخدام النظام السوري الحالي للغازات السامة في تحدي وانتهاك صارخ لإرادة المجتمع الدولي وللقانون الدولي. السيدات والسادة الضيوف الكرام، إن الشعوب العربية قد قدمت أرواحها وما زالت من أجل الحرية والكرامة والحكم الرشيد، تتطلع إلى ضرورة استمرار عمليات الإصلاح التي تم البدء فيها لمواجهة ما تأتي به الثورات من عوارض جانبية وآثار سلبية من أجل بناء مستقبل يتحقق فيه طموح الشعوب في حياة أفضل. لذا يتعين تحقيق التوازن بين تطلعات الشعوب في الأمن والاستقرار والتحول الديمقراطي عبر احترام مقومات الشرعية والعدالة وتعميق قيم الحوار والتسامح، وعدم الإقصاء الطائفي أو السياسي، وتعزيز مبادئ حقوق الإنسان، باعتبار أن هذه المبادئ تعكس أهدافاً سامية يسعى إليها الجميع. لا يزال العالم يبحث عن إمكانات تحفيز النمو الاقتصادي وتحسين معدلاته كمدخل لتحقيق العدالة الاجتماعية وتوفير الاستقرار الذي تتطلع إليه الشعوب. ولا شك أن تحقيق الاستقرار الاقتصادي أو التنموي في منطقة الشرق الأوسط سوف ينعكس بحكم العلاقة التبادلية بين اقتصاديات الدول المختلفة على الاقتصاد العالمي، ولا يمكن تحقيق الاستقرار الاقتصادي بمعزل عن الاستقرار السياسي. وفي هذا الإطار يتعين مواجهة تحديات التنمية والاستجابة على نحو فاعل معها لتجاوز مخاطرها وأثارها السلبية التي قد تشكل تهديداً مباشراً أو غير مباشراً على الاستقرار السياسي والاجتماعي، وبخاصة في الدول الأقل نمواً. ولن يتآتى ذلك إلا من خلال إفساح المجال أمام تعزيز التنمية القطاعية المتوازنة وإيجاد المؤسسات الداعمة للنمو والتنمية، وهذا يتطلب بناء اقتصاديات تعكس أولويات الشعوب وتكون أكثر شمولاً لكافة القطاعات، وتؤدي إلى ارتفاع مستويات المعيشة من خلال زيادة الاهتمام بالتشغيل والتدريب والتعليم والاستثمار والاستخدام الأمثل للطاقات المتاحة وتحقيق الأمن. فالتنمية والأمن مساران لا غنى لأحدهما عن الآخر، فهما الخيار الاستراتيجي لضمان رفاة وازدهار الشعوب. السيدات والسادة الضيوف الكرام، إن مواجهة تحديات التنمية تشكل مجالاً هاماً وضرورياً للتعاون بين الدول، لذا يتعين على المجتمع الدولي معاضدة جهود البلدان الأقل نمواً لبلوغ أهدافها في التنمية الاقتصادية والاجتماعية ومجالاتها الأخرى، وهو ما يتطلب الوفاء بالالتزامات الدولية بشأن المساعدات الإنمائية بكافة أشكالها، بما يفتح الأمل أمام شعوبها في تحقيق التنمية المستدامة المنشودة ويدعم جهود الاستقرار في العالم. وفي هذا السياق فإن دولة قطر لم تألو جهداً في تقديم المساعدات الإنمائية والوفاء بالتزاماتها الدولية في هذا الشأن، سواء بالنسبة لدول المنطقة أو غيرها من المناطق الأخرى في العالم. انطلاقاً من الإيمان الراسخ لدولة قطر تحت القيادة الرشيدة لحضرة صاحب السمو الشيخ تميم بن حمد آل ثاني أمير البلاد المفدى بأهمية تهيئة البيئة المناسبة لتقدم ورفعة المواطن القطري بتغليب مصلحته وتعظيم منفعته وتلبية تطلعاته في شتى المجالات، فقد جعلت الدولة تحقيق الاستقرار الاقتصادي والاجتماعي في مقدمة أولوياتها، مما أسهم في ترسيخ أسس وأركان الدولة الحديثة في إطار الدستور وسيادة القانون واحترام كافة حقوق الإنسان وتحقيق الاستقرار في شتى النواحي الاقتصادية والتنموية والاجتماعية وغيرها. وسوف تواصل دولة قطر تحت القيادة الحكيمة لحضرة صاحب السمو السير في هذا النهج بإذن الله من أجل تحقيق الرخاء والرفاهية والتنمية المستدامة لصالح الشعب القطري عبر رؤية 2030 والخطط الوطنية الاستراتيجية ذات الصلة. السيدات والسادة الضيوف، نحن ندرك أهمية القضايا والموضوعات التي حوتها محاور هذا المنتدى بالنظر إلى المتغيرات السياسية التي يعيشها العالم في الوقت الراهن. لذا فإننا ننظر إلى النتائج التي ستتمخض عنها مناقشاتكم بقدر كبير من العناية لتحقيق الهدف المنشود في هذا المنتدى. وختاما أشكر كل من ساهم في إنجاح أعمال هذا المنتدى، وأشكركم على حسن الاستماع، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Foreign Minister, we thank you very much indeed for kicking off the official proceedings of the Doha Forum and the Economic Conference. We have a top table here, and we will now invite one by one the four guests of honor who are on the top table. May I invite, with a brief introduction from me first, the Vice President of Argentina, Amadou Boudou, economist, and reading up, sir, on your background, not only a DJ, but also a rock guitarist, and who has said, tell me if I'm wrong, rock helps me communicate directly with the people, which we invite you to do now, but perhaps without your guitar. Senor Boudou, thank you.
Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, after 5 years since the beginning of a crisis that initially seemed to be financial, it's clear that its origins and consequences have been economics. From the crisis flourished a new agenda for the international economic debate. This agenda has a basic core of concept besides the wide diversity of vision that surround it. Fundamentally, the principle that states one size does not fit all is the most relevant. There's no unique model that can be applied successfully in every nation, every case. Diversity in human capital, resource allocation, capital accumulation, culture, and institutions show that to have just one valid theory or discourse has failed, being an attempt of modern colonialism mostly built over prejudices. At the same time, the concept of a world which has at its core an efficient and rational financial system has fallen under the bubbles that reality has brought upon us. I do believe that while we suffered, there are many lessons to be learned. Nevertheless, as we know, experience some partial signs of recovery in the global economy, those experiences will probably be forgotten. The new agenda varied, and with that, the essential reform we owe to us. I believe that the main lesson this crisis has brought us is not a new one. The key to achieve a sustainable, resilient, and peaceful economy is the constant improvement in income distribution. I would like to stress this, that appeared to be forgotten during discussions over the international financial architecture, international financial institutions, reforms, international trade architecture, public debt, analysis, and fiscal scenarios. I believe that this main lesson we refer to, that has an economic and social nature, was brought upon by the crisis and has been hidden and put into darkness by technical and excessively biased toward financial system technicalities. The lesson is as simple as we have had it before, since there's no doubt about that it is, in essence, the same that underlied the Great Depression of 1930. Nevertheless, we continue to not pay sufficient attention on it. We can define it by simply saying that there's no sustainability in growth without inclusiveness. Going straight to this point, economy and growth cannot be sustained without improvements in income distribution. Growth that does not create quality jobs sooner than later ends in a sudden stop. Let me be straight. Many means of payment in just a few hands create bubbles. And when this bubble explodes, it matters to all, since it is harmful to the whole society. When a substantial part of all the means of payment are being unlocked into the financial system, while a significant part of the population can afford food, clothing, or housing, the whole economy cannot sustain itself and market resource allocations become inefficient. This assertion has been validated more than once by the facts, in a painful fashion, generating crises that have destroyed jobs, brought hunger and desperation to large groups of people, loss of faith and hope in the economic system, and the possibility of understanding life as a wave of collective and individual improvement through work, effort, knowledge, and innovation. The good news is that this issue can be tackled with the tools we know and have available. In this sense, the role of the state is crucial. If anything was proven by the recent financial crisis is that markets do not have the capacity to work by themselves. Or to put it more precisely, if markets operate alone, isolated from the wider community, they cause profound damage to the whole population. What is indeed surprising is the persistence within mainstream economic and political science of the perception that the less regulated markets are the natural frameworks in favor of economic prosperity, development, and even freedom. This is a very vast vision. What we know as free markets are, in practice, markets with strong regulation that protects only a few above the whole. Then let's address a specific topic, a topic that still keeps us awake and that was part of the agenda during 2008-2011, but is now quickly being forgotten when the situation is improving: the role of the credit rating agencies. First, it is clear that they are not natural institutions, that they are the result of a particular idea of financial regulation. From the idea of the regulated market, we end up having a financial architecture that gives almost endless power to channel resources to a few private firms which their only purpose is, and is valid under this logic, maximize their own profits. Obviously, this does not come from nature. This is the outcome of laws and regulation that make impossible to channel financial resources outside the decisions and judgments of these firms. Thus, CRAs have become at the same time judges and participants in the working of the financial system. This was worsened and straightened by other contradictions that are not natural, but also are institutional arrangement. Inequality and distribution of capital flow systems, transactions in goods and services, people movements across borders, and the unstoppable growth of multinational corporations. Free capital flows among countries is advocated, but free movement of people is being discriminated and restrained. Free market of goods and services is being presented as the best option to increase the welfare of people, but from developed countries, many barriers to the export of developing countries are raised. Transnational corporations organize their production and supply networks, maximizing the use of cheap labor and low social protection, combined with transfer prices to minimize their contribution to public sector funding. All these examples reveal with clarity that nowadays the international financial architecture and multilateral institutions are organized in a way that worsen income distribution and centralize even more all decisions. I haven't mentioned that capital allocation decisions following CRA's prescriptions do not generate value per se. The failure of CRAs was evident during the crisis that started in 2008, where the financial system collapsed and need to be rescued by the state directly through capital contributions and bailout to specific institutions, and indirectly through monetary and regulatory policies oriented toward benefit the financial system. Allow me to share another topic born from the last crisis. Many times, ideology, politics, or vested interests are presented to societies in the form of science. Close to the end of the 90s, mainstream theories developed and spread the moral hazard concept, and in its base abandoned, for example, Argentina, and interrupt all financial aid in its hardest times. At that time, the acknowledgement was heard afterwards by the involved IFIs, but my country has been virtually destroyed. The public sector collapsed, public budget was cut, unemployment rose by 25%, while public workers' salaries and pension benefits were also cut. all as part of the plan involving other restrictive consolidation measures that were set and agreed before as conditionalities by the IFIs. This prescription, plus the application of the moral hazard theory, brought a community close to the point of social dissolution. Let's realize the difference of framework during the last financial crisis. Talk about moral hazard has stopped. Now, everything was about too big to fail. That is to say, let's help the big ones, which in this case are the firms and not the countries. That implies partial and ideological stance determining the lives of millions, presented as scientific knowledge. Help was available for big entities and corporations, but not for the millions of unemployment not yet recovered all over the world. We were talking about the debt burden over the countries and societies. When there is talk of excessive public spending and fiscal consolidation, the aim is to make room for the ever-servicing of debt payments. I believe the spending should be focused instead to improve income distribution, to promote growth and build infrastructure. Inclusive growth first. The public budget can be one of the most important tools to improve income distribution, both directly and indirectly. Transfer permit the transferring of resources from greater income brackets to those most propense to consume and spend, but also enhancing health and education expenditures permit a better distribution in a more dynamic fashion in time by improving future income of the less privileged. I delight to share these ideas and experience with you. We clearly share from our diverse stances the passion to construct a new world, a safer world, fairer, more inclusive, more in peace, more secure, with greater understanding among people. I am certain that these objectives require both a better distribution of wealth between and within countries, and I am sure that with courage and the correct interpretation of history, this can be achieved. Concerned but highly optimistic, I thank you for the possibility of participating here today. Thank you very much.
Senor Bourdieu, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I would now like to invite up onto the stage the Assistant to the President of Sudan, that is Abdulrahman al-Sadiq al-Mahdi, who's been given the task by his President of improving, among other things, relations with South Sudan. Please, sir, come up. And a man who has suggested that a confederation of South Sudan, Egypt, and Sudan, among other countries, would be of an enormous benefit to the whole region. It'd be lovely to hear your ideas.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسل الله حضرة صاحب السمو الشيخ تميم بن حمد آل ثاني أمير دولة قطر، حضرات السادة والسيدات الحضور الكريم، مع حفظ ألقابكم ومقاماتكم السامية المحترمة، مفكرو العالم وسياسيي وقادة الرأي، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. اسمحوا لي في البدء أن أشكر الحبيب الأمير على رعايته هذا المنتدى الهام، وحكومته القديرة، وشعب قطر المضياف، والشكر لكم جميعا للحضور. عنوان الموضوع هو رؤى حول الاستقرار العالمي الاستراتيجي والاقتصادي والتنموي. الأطروحة طويلة وموزعة مع حضراتكم وعند السكرتارية، اختصرتها في الآتي: هذا العنوان ينبغي أن يشمل العامل الديني والثقافي أي الحضاري، لأن الاستقرار العالمي يتطلب معادلة لتعايش الحضارات والأديان. كوكب الأرض فيه عوامل توحيد جاذبة لمركز كوني واحد سنتريبيتال تغذي الاستقرار وتتطلب حوكمة عالمية وحدوية عوامل تكنولوجية بالاتصالات والمعلومات والمواصلات والعولمة الاقتصادية، وعوامل طبيعية كالفضاء والبيئة والمناخ والمياه المشتركة. وهنالك عوامل تفرقة طاردة من المركز سنتريفيوغال تغذي الاستقطابات وتؤدي لحروب تزداد خطورتها بوجود أسلحة الدمار الشامل، وهي اختلال الميزان الاستراتيجي بين الدول والتفاوت التنموي والتباين الحضاري والديني. نعم، أبرمت اتفاقيات لمنع انتشار أسلحة الدمار الشامل، ولكن الحصول عليها يتوقف على 3 عوامل: على المعرفة التكنولوجية وهذه يستحيل حجرها، وعلى الإمكانيات المادية وهي متاحة بلا حدود، والدوافع والتي بتوفرها لن تمنع الاتفاقيات الحصول على السلاح النووي. هل يستطيع العالم أن يحقق نظاماً عالمياً مستقراً؟ سأحاول الإجابة على الصعيد العالمي وعلى الصعيد الإقليمي الشرق الأوسطي. الوضع التنموي والاقتصادي العالمي. الحالة التنموية العالمية فيها خلل كبير، يحظى 20% من سكان العالم ب80% من الدخل. الفكر الماركسي تنبأ في القرن ال19 بمواجهة بين الطبقتين الرأسمالية والعمالية تؤدي لثورة تمكن العمال، ولكن الحركة النقابية في الدول الرأسمالية الديمقراطية حققت مكاسب أدت لاستقرار النظام الرأسمالي بالمشاركة الطبقية في الثروة والدخل. وبعد الحرب العالمية الثانية أنعشت الولايات المتحدة اقتصاد أوروبا الغربية بمشروع مارشال وضخ بلايين الدولارات. كذلك فعلت ألمانيا الغربية مع الشرقية، ضخت حوالي تريليون دولار. كذلك فعل الاتحاد الأوروبي مع دول أوروبا الشرقية لدعم التنمية والديمقراطية. العالم الشمالي الغني أدرك أن فقر الدول الجنوب يفرخ عدم الاستقرار، وعقد حوار الشمال والجنوب في ثمانينيات القرن الماضي عبر مفوضية برئاسة المستشار الألماني السابق ويلي برانت، فأوصت بنظام اقتصادي عالمي أعدل يلتزم فيه الشمال بإجراءات لصالح الجنوب، وبمراجعة استراتيجية المنظمات الدولية المالية والاقتصادية، وبضوابط لنشاط الشركات المتجاوزة للحدود. ولكن الدول الغنية رفضت التوصيات. كذلك حاولت الأمم المتحدة مخاطبة الخلل التنموي عبر أهداف الألفية بنهاية القرن العشرين، وألقت التزامات مالية على الدول الغنية. ولكن نحن الآن على مشارف النهاية في 2015 ولم تتحقق أهم الأهداف. كذلك لم تلتزم الدول الغنية بمقررات مؤتمر كوبنهاجن عام 2009 بتعويض الدول الفقيرة عن نتائج تلوث البيئة. دول الشمال تحظى بامتياز اقتصادي كبير وتعارض أي تعديلات جذرية في النظام الاقتصادي العالمي لصالح دول الجنوب، وتستخدم امتيازاتها لتطويع مخالفي سياساتها. هذا الامتياز الاقتصادي مدعوم بميزان القوى الاستراتيجية، احتكار النادي النووي والسلاح الذي يصدرونه بدون ضوابط حقوق الإنسان. حديث السيدة كونداليسا رايس في القاهرة قالت: دعمنا الطغاة لتحقيق الاستقرار فلم نحققه وضحينا بالديمقراطية. والتدخل لتوجيه السياسات في دول الجنوب واستخدام حركات تقاتل بالوكالة. السياسات الغربية في أفغانستان وفي العراق والصومال وغيرها أتاحت فرصاً كبيرة للقاعدة وأخواتها برفع شعارات إسلامية مع مسلك إرهابي يتناقض مع مبادئ الإسلام وبدون ضوابطه للقتال. الإسلام يمثل قوة ثقافية برغم ضعف الدول الإسلامية، ويحوز على رأس المال الاجتماعي الأكبر في بلدان المسلمين الذين يستنكر أغلبيتهم عدم التوازن الاقتصادي والاستراتيجي العالمي، ولكنهم يرفضون أساليب القاعدة، ولكن المظالم تساعد الشباب للانخراط فيها على نحو ما قال سير إيفور روبرتس السفير البريطاني في إيطاليا عام 2004، إذ وصف الرئيس الأمريكي السابق جورج بوش بأنه أكفأ ضابط تجنيد للقاعدة. نظام الأمم المتحدة الحالي وبعض منظماته حقق أهدافاً مهمة للإنسانية، ولكنه نظام وضعه المنتصرون في الحرب العالمية الثانية، فاحتكروا حق النقد الذي يستخدمونه لصالح أصدقائهم وضد خصومهم بدون مراعاة للعدالة، مما أصاب مجلس الأمن أحياناً بالشلل. وقد تكون النظام في غياب غالبية الدول الحالية، مما يستدعي مراجعته بصورة تجعله أكثر عدالة. العنف في العالم اليوم يمارسه الحكام الطغاة ضد شعوبهم وأقطاب الهيمنة الدولية الذين يتصرفون حتى خارج قرارات مجلس الأمن، وإسلامويون إرهابيون يعتبرون خلاف العقيدة سبباً للقتال، مما يعني أن صنع السلام مسألة فكرية تستوجب التخلص من العوامل المفرخة للعنف، أن السلام تحقيقه مسألة فكرية. All this means that the process of peacemaking is an intellectual issue، مما يعني أن هذا الفورم هو أحدى أهم الوسائل لتحقيق الاستقرار العالمي. إن المواثيق الدولية لحقوق الإنسان مع جودتها غالباً لا تنفذ. التباين الاقتصادي والاستراتيجي العالمي تغذيه الحرب الباردة بين الأديان والحضارات، والحل أن تتصالح الأديان والحضارات مع منظومة حقوق الإنسان وتتحاور فيما بينها. العدل في المجالات المعنوية يحقق الاستقرار، مثل مركز التوازن في الأمور الحسية Center of Gravity، ولكن حالياً حتى البلدان الديمقراطية فيها غياب للديمقراطية الاجتماعية، أما البلدان غير الديمقراطية فالتظلم فيها مركب، وهناك التظلم العالمي المذكور. هنالك وسيلتان للتغيير، هي إما وسيلة العنف التي اتخذها الإرهابيون وهي لا تجدي، ووسيلة القوى الناعمة بالفكر المستنير وبالوسائل المدنية. سياسات الهيمنة الدولية تشكل دعماً موضوعياً لأساليب العنف والإرهاب، ولتحقيق الاستقرار العالمي مطلوب تحالف بين القوى المستنيرة في دول الشمال ودعاة التغيير بالقوة الناعمة في عالم الجنوب لبناء نظام عالمي أعدل وأفضل. الشرق الأوسط هو الأكثر حوجة للديمقراطية والاستقرار، وله أهمية استراتيجية لبتروله ولموقعه الجيوسياسي، ووجود إسرائيل المحمية الدولية وحركات الإرهاب فيه، وكونه مهبط الديانات السماوية المقدسة. ثورات الربيع العربي أطاحت بالاستبداد، ولكن لم تطبق برنامجاً ثورياً بديلا، وإن شدت الشعوب للانعتاق وبسبب تعطيل تطور المنظمات السياسية المدنية. ففي دول الربيع العربي تفوقت في الانتخابات القوى ذات الانتماء الديني واختلف نهجها، ففي مصر فضلت المغالبة، وفي تونس اختارت المشاركة. العالم العربي فيه الآن تقاطعات تؤدي لمواجهات بين حكومات تستشهد بفوضى الربيع العربي وتعمل للمحافظة على الأوضاع وإن لزم إصلاحات محدودة، وشعوب تطالب بالحريات، وبين سنة وشيعة ومسلمين ومسيحيين وإسلاميين وعلمانيين وإخوان وسلفيين وأغنياء وفقراء وعرب وقوميات أخرى. أطراف هذه المواجهات قوة حقيقية تجد دعما خارجيا إقليميا ودوليا، فالاجتثاث المتبادل مستحيل، وهذا مناخ يخلق الفوضى ويعطي فرصا للغلو والإرهاب، ويعد بسفك الدماء والتدمير. وبعد سفك الدماء والتدمير سيتأكد استحالة نفي الآخر والانفراد بالأمر. الحل الوحيد لكي لا تدمر المنطقة نفسها بنفسها هو الإقلاع عن المواقف النافية للآخر، وتقبل حرية التنافس، والاتفاق على وثيقة فكرية توافقية تجسر الهوة بين أطراف الاستقطاب، وإيجاد آليات حكماء لإطفاء الحرائق والحيلولة دون انتشارها، وتكوين صندوق تنمية استراتيجي لمحاربة الفقر والعطالة وتحقيق التنمية. هذا المشروع المستنير هو الأجدى للقضاء على حركات الغلو والإرهاب، ولخلق تحالف نوراني بين الاستنارة العربية والاستنارة الدولية، وإلا أفسح المجال لتحالف شيطاني بين دعاة الهيمنة الدولية وتيارات الغلو والإرهاب. أمامك فاختر أي نهجيك تنهج، طريقان شتى مستقيم وأعوج. وشكرا جزيلا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Thank you very much indeed. The message one hopes is going to be conveyed here is that there needs to be greater understanding and greater tolerance among the nations of the world. Let us hope that that is furthered here over the next 2 days. Can I please now invite Recep Kemal Maidani, the third president of Albania between 1997 and 2002, a scientist by training but a politician. We'll find out whether it's by nature or by nurture. Please come and join us on the stage.
Good evening. Your Highness, Excellencies, honored colleagues and participants. Your Highness, addressing the Doha Forum 1 year ago, among others, you have emphasized 3 important pillars. First, international community must act to stop Syria's horrifying tragedy. Secondly, to end the conflict, Israel-Palestine, based on 2-state solutions. Particularly, the Arab Revolution have set Israel in direct confrontation today with Arab people, and not only with the rulers. Third, Arab population want their say in political and economic decision making. When I was thinking more deeply about these 3 pillars, I saw a common element: the wall, the barriers. In fact, while our world is becoming more interconnected and interdependent, in the same time, it is safeguarding barriers and walls of different kinds. One of them was the Berlin Wall, which has represented both the physical separation between 2 German states and the clear boundary between democracy and communism. Its destruction represents the fall of totalitarian systems in Eastern Europe. Unfortunately, with events in Ukraine, we are coming back to the cold area. Another wall, physical, psychological, ethnic, and religious one, is the dividing 2 communities, Israeli and Palestinians. In fact, as you said, the peace in the Middle East region is closely linked to this division, originated from the land and right of property, religion, and existence. The permanent clashes between two communities have affected not only the Middle East and Arab world, but also the entire world. Its solution will ensure stability in the region, but also will create a profound impact in global politics. In this sense, as the Emir has declared, the movement of Arab uprisings has placed Israel today in direct confrontation with Arab population, and in my view, this is a great change to be seriously resized. Another question in Arab world is how the democratic development is linked to the electoral process. In my view, the multi-party system and free and fair elections are only necessary conditions. To reach any success, sufficient conditions need to take place, but their fulfillment is related to real social and economic progress of many Arab countries. A positive example, an economic success is, in my view, also Qatar state. Another example is what is happening some years ago. The United States was starting a project of building walls at the border with Mexico to minimize the illegal border crossing. Now this illegal moving is now in less controlled area. But physical walls are not only a part of the problem of our world. Of major concern are the ideological and religious walls, the cultural walls, the wall of autocracy, the wall of abuses and corruption, false populism, etc. With presence of ideological walls and its destruction was linked in my country the exodus of Albanians at the beginning of transition, more than 20 years ago. They felt overwhelmed by hopelessness in the face of domestic situation and started to leave the country. Also with these ideological and colonial walls of modern time was linked the exodus of Bosnians and the Kosovo populations during crisis in former Yugoslavia. In addition to ideological and geopolitical walls of Cold War, other divisive walls are social economic ones, the walls between the rich and poor regions, the rich and poor groups, which in my view was one of the drivers of the Arab Spring. The walls of technological divisions between high-tech manufacturing and user countries, of countries totally separated of the process of technological adoptions. The walls between countries selling goods and high technological services and countries supplying raw materials for less money, damaging or polluting their environment. Very problematic are walls of human exclusion with a country or among different countries, including different barriers from visa restriction and border sanctions policies to the strengthening of the law on asylum or readmission agreements. In this sense, the Schengen project in Europe itself, it seems in many cases for people living outside this region as a project wall. Of course, not for Europeans within this Schengen area. In the case of Eastern Europe, particularly in Balkans, very important remains the destruction of the borders myth. Another concern, there is the respect of cultural diversity, particularly the break of walls for ethnic and religious exclusion, and gender division. In fact, today, the countries of Western Balkans, after years of bloodshed, ethnic cleansing and genocide in former Yugoslavia, are focused entirely into the European Union accession. This transformative power of European Union enlargement in Balkans was immense. Thus, after the European Union membership of Slovenia, Romania, and Bulgaria, another step was the membership of Croatia. Other events are the free movement of citizens inside Schengen area, the acceleration of dialogue, Kosovo-Serbia, as well as the start of Kosovo negotiation for stabilization association agreement, the Serbia accession process, the candidate status for Albania, etc. A parallel process has been NATO accession, initially for Greece and Turkey, later for Bulgaria, Romania, and Slovenia, and some years ago for Albania and Croatia. Both processes have played an important role for stability and peace, democracy and development in the region. However, social cohesion against social exclusion, social development against poverty and unemployment are important factors to political stability and economic development in Western Balkans. In this sense, cross-cultural contacts and strong economic interactions are breaking down the former barriers among countries and ethnic groups and religious ones. Particularly, the cultural diversity as a plurality of the identities is one of the most important factors in reaching a healthy social cohesion. Above all, the cultural diversity, considering both physical aspects and mental ones, is becoming a source of exchange and social inclusion, an important factor in development, trade, and economic growth in Balkans. Another step is to go from cultural diversity to cultural pluralism, and we see today a peaceful, very peaceful region. A special view of cultural diversity is the protection of human rights in a regional level, respect of human dignity, language, and culture practices, etc. Another aspect is the fighting of discrimination and xenophobia, and above all, the mediation, the conflict resolution, the reconciliation, and the collective sorrow, the process of forgiveness. In the case of our region, Balkans, this general process was not a finished one, including the collective sorrow to the victims among Albanians, Bosnians, populations, etc. However, in the last time, Kosovo-Belgrade talks have had a remarkable progress in ameliorating the regional conciliation, stability, and prosperity, making the borders in Balkans region less important, vibrating and slowly breaking the borders, substituted them by bridges. The story of walls, in my view, does not end here. We live ourselves within walls. They are walls of lack of freedom and dignity, psychological walls of fear and absence of courage, of public resistance, walls of surrendering to the political powers, and so on. In fact, what is required is the opposite, reducing or breaking all these walls inside and outside us. Thus, our world is still preserving diverse boundaries or walls, and for their collapses, a tireless work is needed. Part of this work is also this international forum, and I wish success to him. Closely, my remarks, I would like to thank the organizers for invitation to participate in this 14th Doha Forum, which I believe will give another contribution in several vital issues of our world and finding adequate answers on both local and international levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medani. We now come to the fourth of our honored guests speaking this evening, Dominique de Villepin, former Prime Minister of France, who as Foreign Secretary told the United Nations about a possible invasion of Iraq. Let us not forget that having won the war, one has to build peace, and this will be long and difficult. Monsieur Villepin, please.
Your Highness, Excellencies, and dear friends, we are in a highly unstable world, in a world where every sparkle can set whole regions in fire. It's a time of revolutions and civil wars that create instability within the states. We have seen the Arab Spring. We have seen Egypt stricken in an endless cycle of revolutions and counter-revolutions. We see Africa more and more falling victim to divisions and hates. It's a time of confrontations and nationalism, fueled by humiliations of the past. It's true in Russia concerning its lost empire. It's true in China concerning disputed territories with Japan, with Vietnam, or the Philippines. It's a time of economic crisis that creates inequalities and tensions. There are bubbles threatening to burst, sovereign debts, real estate bubbles, or regional bubbles. We have to ask ourselves, what is the cause of all this instability? The cause, let me tell you out of my own experience, is always excess. Excess through force. The military intervention in Iraq has been the symbol of the mistakes of the West. The truth of international relations is that every actions create a reaction. You can't act responsibly if you don't anticipate the consequences of your own actions. Force always creates new imbalances, new problems. Look at what happened in Libya. Force was used to support civilians against a cruel dictatorship. But what happened? It strengthened jihadist fighters in the Sahara and gave them massive access to weapons. This led to new use of force by France in Mali to stop jihadist brigades to take Bamako. This in turn created a climate against Muslims in Africa and led to religious violences in Central Africa. And France, again, had to intervene to protect, in particular, Muslim population from massacres. It's a cycle of imbalances without end. Force never creates balance. The cause of instability is always excess indeed, excess of ideology. Everywhere we see the temptation to settle accounts, to set moral standards for others without always respecting them for oneself. It can be the arrogance of democracies who think they have the ultimate truth about a better world. It can be the arrogance of religions that lead to fanaticism, violence, and intolerance. We should remember, ideologies create explosive identities, and it is not by chance that the world seems to be crumbling apart, that many states are going through a phase of partition, that communities fight each other. Look at Iraq, at Libya, look at Ukraine with its deep cultural divisions, look at Europe, at Spain and Catalonia, at England and Scotland. Excess, as I said, but excess of greed also. When financial instability is created by imbalances in the worldwide financial system, by the capture of the world's interests through the interest of some regions of the world. This is the lesson we should have learned from the crisis of 2008. Let me take two quick examples of unfairness that creates dangerous imbalances. First, the currency system. One national currency has become the only worldwide currency, the US dollar. We need a more balanced system, taking into account other currencies, like the euro or the yuan. We could use the basket of currencies as a new reference, as the General de Gaulle proposed already 50 years ago. Second example, the risk assessment. Today, the ratings of 3 US-based credit rating agencies decide almost alone where the world money should flow and where not, or rather at what price it will flow, here or there. This means the main debtor economy of the world control the taps of the creditor countries in Asia or in the Middle East. This means also less growth, because the money doesn't go where it would be most useful, and whole sectors of finance are forgotten. For example, Islamic finance. This is neither fair nor sound for the future. That's why we need more diversity in the credit rating. We need new types of credit rating agencies, and we need new forms of regulation, like the introduction of a dual rating system, both with local and with global criteria. Stability is not only an objective, it's an ethic obligation, and this is my message today. It's a day-to-day commitment to rebalancing the world. Committing to stability means thinking ahead. It means taking into account the consequences of your actions, and it is, at the same time, anticipating the crises that have not occurred. Our mission is vigilance, for ourselves as well as for our friends. The threats of terrorism needs to be measured well ahead, in particular in a region like here, with many worldwide events coming ahead. Committing to stability means acting for every crisis. If you let a crisis without response, you will accumulate frustrations and hate, as we have seen with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And the sooner you act, the better. That's why we should act fast in the Ukrainian crisis. We have to build step-by-step approaches, dissipate the misunderstandings on all sides, and make the solution of the crisis possible. Today, this means creating an increasing legitimacy of the Ukrainian institutions through elections and through constitutional reforms. And it means giving guarantees to all partners on the neutrality and the integrity of the Ukrainian state. Committing to stability means choosing realism over ideology, being pragmatic and humble, taking realities as they are. We need to take time. We need to accept that there can be failures or delays. On Syria, we have been blinded by our good intentions. We have not taken enough into account the resistances and the obstacles. But today, let's be pragmatic and ask ourselves, what can we do on a daily basis? We can try to alleviate the hardships of the Syrian people. We can put all our weight on humanitarian efforts through the UN, while we keep working on the ways and means of the new political process. Your Highness, Excellencies, dear friends, yes, the key of stability is dialogue. This means mediation, and there are countries which have a particular capacity and a particular destiny to be mediators. It's true of France, a country that has learned how easy it is to go to war and how difficult it is to step out of it. But I think this role of mediation is also a role for your country, at a time when more than ever we need innovative and discreet diplomatic efforts. Efforts, when they are made in front of the media, are bound to create images, not solutions. This means also a global and a regional governance to make dialogue possible. We need, of course, stronger United Nations, but we need also stronger regional organizations. It is difficult everywhere, we must assess. It is difficult in the EU, it is difficult in the African Union, and even here in the Gulf Cooperation Council, because new adjustments have always to be found to go forward. This means, last of all, choosing dialogue between countries, between cultures, and between civilizations. There are never enough bridges. We have to hold the world together with our own hands. Stability is never granted. Working towards a more balanced world, this is what experience should teach us today. That's why I'm so happy to see this Forum of Doha growing as a place of exchange of ideas, of tolerance, which means preparing for the future new and useful initiatives. Thank you.
Monsieur Villepin, thank you very much indeed. In fact, many thanks to all of our honored guests this evening who've started a discussion which will be enjoyed by everybody, I'm sure, in many ways over the next few days. It is now time, I have to tell you, for His Highness the Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, to take his leave when he wishes. Please remain where you are. I'm told that dinner will be served very, very soon. Just a few minutes. Enjoy the evening and look forward to 2 days of fascinating dialogue and attentive listening. Thank you.